Okay, plaid manners or plaid man showers, PMSers, what have you. Today we're talking about a super interesting subject, I think, but frankly rather controversial. And it came up in the most absurd ways. We are talking about eugenics. Eugenics. And I looked up the definition, and the top one was like basically just exclusive to humans. And that's not how I got there in today's topic. So, simplicity of it is, story time is, hey, I was doing some normal manual work, and there's a lady I work for, and she raises Bernese Mountain Dogs, breeds and raises them. And she's got a new Pastel of 6, adorably like tiny, like the size like the size of my hand plus a little bit is what these puppies look like. They're 2 days old, and they're cute, but they look like gerbils, like fluffy cute gerbils, but still gerbils. Anyways, obviously when they get a little older, they'll look cuter. Whatever, that's not the point. So I was talking to the two ladies that were helping her, and it was interesting because for the Berner community or Bernese Mountain Dog community, when they mate, when they mate, I'm just gonna have to be loud because that's the heater, and I forgot to turn it off, so we're just gonna be loud. How about that? When they mate, the both humans who own the dogs, they're like, okay, cool. So let's say they're like this. It's like, well, you tell me how good your dog is, and you tell me how good your dog is. And they have a very long list of things. And it's not just like how good the dog looks when it's brushed. It's everything about the dog. Like everything about the dog, basically. And I was like, that's super fascinating. How interesting is it that in this dog breeding community, it's okay to like know everything about the dog before you breed, but humans don't do that. And I don't know much about the horse breeding community, but I imagine that my limited understanding is it's even more extensive. Like, oh, you want a dog that's good, or sorry, in this case, you want a horse that's good for jumping, or a horse that's good for this, or a horse that's good for this, blah, blah, blah. They have this idea that it's all in the genes. And I think there's some truth to that. If you have a horse that's good at jumping or whatever it is, and you have a dog that's good for a certain thing or whatever it is, then like, yeah, you tend to breed that and you expound on that particular trait and train it into the dogs. Now, what I found fascinating is so basically, in short, with animals, it's totally okay to basically do eugenics. It's totally okay. It's acceptable. It's understood. It's like a given. Like, yeah, no problem. We're trying to create this perfect breed of this type of dog or this type of horse or this type of whatever, right? We being humans. And so it's okay to be like, okay, well, so what we're going to do is we are going to breed blank dog and the blank dog together to create a better version of those combined things. Okay, no problem. I don't really have an issue with that. Where it becomes fascinating is like, well, why don't humans do that? Like, why? Because, I mean, I'm wearing a hat, but like, my hair's kind of thin. Kind of, sort of, a lot of thin, right? And I have hazel eyes, which you can't see in this video. No, not really. You can't really tell. I look kind of brown. Anyhow, so I have hazel eyes. My dad has blue eyes. My mom has brown eyes. So I got lucky, I guess, sort of, kind of a little bit, and I have hazel eyes. But one could make an argument that like, well, but if you wanted to like keep blue eyes around, then blue-eyed people should mate with blue-eyed people, and then the likelihood of having a blue-eyed child is exponentially increased. But that's a no-go. That's not okay in humanity. We do not do that. Then you get into the realm of eugenics. Now, in my limited understanding of eugenics, it is a really bad term. It's like a really nasty fucking term. In the sense of a term, in the sense of like, oh, it's associated, in my knowledge, it's associated with the Germans. And I think that's a bit of a misnomer, because what the Germans did during World War II, what Germany did, what the Nazis did, we should be more specific. What the Nazis did during World War II was not exclusively eugenics. We're gonna bookmark this. I'm calling eugenics a science thing. Okay? So to overly simplify, to me, eugenics is when you take when you take one race or one culture or one breed or one entity, if you will, and you're trying to create the best form of that entity. Okay? Animal or human or otherwise. That's what science does. It purges the negative things and therefore tries to breed just the positive things to create an ideal scene. Okay? Fair enough. So, and when you take the human emotion out of it and you take the other stuff out of it, the cosmetic stuff, whatever, when you take that out of it and you just make it a science thing, it actually has some merit. I only say that because, well, misspoke. Horse breeders, they both start with H, okay? So, sorry. Horse breeders and dog breeders and even chicken breeders and stuff like that. Like and cow breeders, yada 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 yada. Any breeding that humankind does for any particular thing, they're trying to get a certain result with the breed that they're going for, and when they breed them together, this is what we're trying to do. Okay, that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But the question is, why don't we do it with humans? Okay? And part of it is because, well, when we're breeding these other animals, we're trying to get a certain result. And so you have a horse or a dog, right? They're at this point, and humans are above them, technically speaking, because humans feed, they water, they take care of dogs, horses, and all this stuff. They do all these things. They pay for the vet bills, they pay for all the stuff, the training, and all these things. So the humans are actually responsible for the well-being of these domesticated animals. Okay? And rightfully so, we don't domesticate humans. Like, we try and make the world domesticated for humans, but we don't domesticate humans, right? And that's a good and a bad thing. And here's my argument for why eugenics might actually be a good thing. So I'm, arguably balding. Like, you look at my dad, you'd be like, yeah, eventually, bro, you're gonna bald. And my hair is very thin and yada, yada, yada. And whereas my lady, she's got extremely thick, gorgeous hair, right? So hypothetically, if we have kids, like, I'd want our kids to have her hair. 100% her hair. Because my hair is like, but 100% her hair. That'd be great. But that's not how it works. And I know that technologically we're getting into like CRISPR and kind of like a, build your own child technology. That's a thing that's happening. Which I actually think is kind of a contemporary technological solution to eugenics. But it's an interesting phenomena where it's like, why has humanity, in my knowledge, never ever done eugenics ever? Like, you get some sects of humanity that do it, usually like royalty in the West, like in Europe, they did it, but they almost did it too much. And really, they didn't actually do eugenics. What they did was, calling it inbreeding was like a after effect of what they did. But what they were trying to do is maintain a royal line. So it wasn't based on science. It was based on lineage, which isn't a bad thing, kind of, sort of, but it is also kind of bad in that they were just trying to maintain lineage, but it wasn't based on science. So my argument is this: if you have someone, or if you have someone who's very capable at a certain thing, right, then in theory you would want to be like, oh, well, we want more of that thing, right? So let's say Einstein, for instance. Einstein, genius, right? Man of his time. When you want Einstein to have 100 children, and modern whatever times would be like, no, what? How could he possibly afford 100 children? Like, you have any idea how much diapers cost and how much the food costs and all this stuff? And I'm like, but he's super duper intelligent. So if intelligence was in any way genetic, would we want to like replicate that? Like, let's take 100 people who are not Albert Einstein and they're just kind of average people. Wouldn't we want to like skip that and just like make 100 Einsteins? Like, and this is one of the debates I was having with the ladies about Bernese Mountain Dogs. Is I was like, well, okay, so in my opinion, in my experience, intelligence, and history would illustrate this, intelligence is not genetic. So the two best examples, one I already mentioned, which is Einstein, his parents were not super intelligent. They weren't. Okay, so there's that. So it's like, well, you have two not super duper intelligent people, and then they create one super duper intelligent person. You're like, well, what the F? What just happened? Right? Another example would be William Shakespeare. Like, as far as history can tell, his parents were not super intelligent or capable, but he's lauded in the West as the most prolific writer of our time. And he is amazing, and his works are awesome. I'm not knocking him. But my point is like, okay, well, so if it's not genetic, if intelligence is not genetic, which I don't think it is, I think intelligence is the situation, it's nurture over nature, okay? I personally think that. I think intelligence is nurture over nature. And I will add this other thing that is not widely talked about, which is it's the person. Or, in my opinion, it's the being, it's the spiritual being in that body. So, here's an example. Guy and woman, guy and a girl get together and they have a baby, right? So here's the baby. And the baby's like, I'm going to do my life, right? And then guy and girl get together and have another baby. And the second baby's like, I'm going to do something different. Guy and girl get together. Third baby, I'm just going to be a lazy whatever, bum, whatever. Okay, so now you have these three children, and each one of them are different from each other. Why? I mean, genetically, they have similarities. You can connect them with mom and dad, right? But genetically, each one of them are different. Not only do they look different, they act different, they operate differently, they think of things differently. Now, there are similarities, okay, based on the nurture and the nature of their situation, right? But they are each one of them different individuals, which, in my opinion, blows the doors out of this concept of like intelligence is genetic, because it ain't. Because you have three children from the same mom and dad, and they are drastically different children. Okay? That's just a fact. It's just a fact. I'm sorry. It is a fact. Look at any child or siblings from the same family. They're totally different. They were raised the same. Okay? Now, granted, no parent raises their kids exactly the same. This is not a lab science experiment. Okay? However, they're different. They're different. So that kind of takes out the whole like, oh, genetic and science stuff. However, I will say this. There is validity in maybe taking out certain people out of the gene pool. I don't think it's an intelligence thing, but I will say this. There are certain traits that are nice to have and keep. So like, for instance, redheads is a good example, or blondes is a good example, because redheads and blondes, color, both of those are regressive genes. If I'm not, I don't know, maybe misspeaking, but meaning like, so if a redhead has a kid with a brunette, right, then the chances are that the child will have brown hair. Chances are the child will have brown hair. And what happens is that we now lose, we've diluted the redhead hair gene. Similar with blue eyes and brown eyes. If a blue-eyed person and a brown-eyed person have a baby, there's a high likelihood that the child will have brown eyes. Just what happens. Now, is this a bad thing? No, it's not inherently a bad thing. It's not the end of the world. But what will happen in the short, or rather in the medium to long term, what's going to happen is that everyone's going to have brown hair. Everyone's going to have brown eyes. Why? Because the darker tones end up overpowering the lighter tones. So we're not going to have a lot of blondes, or not like actual natural blondes. We're not going to have a lot of natural blondes, a lot of natural redheads, blue eyes, green eyes, stuff like that. They're going to go away. Now, that's just cosmetic. Then we get into like other things where you get into like ability and physical ability and stuff like that. And this gets really, really fuzzy, because it's like, well, okay, if a person was into eugenics, they'd be like, oh, how do I create, let me create the best soccer team or football team or whatever team, right, ever. How would I do that? I want people who are good runners and good throwers and good capable, yeah. And the problem is like, no, you could take the Hall of Fame of any sport, right? The top 10 Hall of Famers of any sport, and take their offspring. That doesn't mean that their offspring is going to be capable of the same stuff that their mom and dad were. I mean, it goes to show like how there's nature nurture, right? And then there's the individual. Elon Musk is from South Africa. How come there's not another billionaire or bunches of billionaires from South Africa? It isn't because South Africa is like the billionaire central of the world. What it is an individual in his circumstances overcome a bunch of things to get to that point. And one could argue that he is the way he is because of the obstacles that he had to overcome. But even if you were to do a science experiment and give another person those same obstacles, they would not necessarily overcome them. So Elon Musk is who Elon Musk is, and that's how he is. But in saying all that, I think humans are very fascinating, because I do think there is a value in like, hey, how do I not have this? Like, how do I not have balding? Or how do I get a widow's peak? Or yada, yada, yada. There is a value to that, right? I think there's a tremendous value in like, let's figure out how we can have each individual have the hair that they want and the way that they want and how they want, and be able to kind of like manipulate their own DNA to work well. Okay? And it'll start in simple things like, how do we not have like people who are getting to a certain point and their hands are doing this? Like, it's a gene thing, and we can help them. Or people with memory loss. Like, how come some people have memory loss and other people don't? That's effed, man. I don't want my parents to have memory loss. That's effed. Why have we not figured that out? And I feel like you can breed that out, right? You can breed that out. But inherently, there is this universal, fundamental thing that has been part of most cultures, not all, but most cultures since the beginning of time, which is choice. And choice is it's the unspoken word of freedom. So what you have is you have people who have the freedom to choose who they have children with. And that is a beautifully, I almost said American, it's a beautifully human trait. Granted, other cultures, other races, other animals do this similar things, like penguins, for instance. That's the top of my head. They're like, oh, cool, we mate, and then we're mates for life. This is it. This no one else is it, right? And that's super admirable. But the question is that the best thing? Not just with the penguins, but with humans, where it's like, shouldn't we be breeding out certain things that don't really work? And I'm not talking about color. This is not a race thing. This is not a whatever thing or a hair preference thing. Like, oh, you know what I want? I want a fro. I just want a fro. How come I didn't get a fro? I feel like I'm gypped. Like, that isn't the point. The point is like, there are certain deficiencies that are less than ideal. And honestly, I feel like some of them, and science should really evaluate this, some of them are just not really that bad. And some of them are actually things that we need to breed out and get rid of. Like, we should not have them anymore. This is not pro-survival whatsoever, right? So there might be some advantages to like breeding out certain things that we don't want anymore. These are not good things. I'm trying to think of what the one where you have a bunch of like boils all over your face and you have a limited amount of time to your life. I'm thinking of Kingdom of Heaven. I almost wish I could talk. If I talked to my girlfriend, she'd be like, oh, what you're talking about is this. It's this thing where it's like you got all the stuff on your face and whatever. I can't think of it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. And it's kind of a rarity. Like, you never see it. Never in real life. And maybe it's just because they're hiding out somewhere, but I don't know. But there are some things in life where it's like, yeah, no, in theory, we could breed these out. And I made this joke because I was kind of curious. I was like, well, okay, so let's say you find this woman that you're amazing with, and or this person that you're in love with, and you're like, cool, I want to marry this person. And let's assume, for sake of conversation, I know this is 2021, coming up on 2022, and not a lot of people do this anymore, but like, okay, let's say you haven't had sexual intercourse with this other individual that you want to marry. Okay, and then you find out, this is kind of leading up to our question. You find out that this person that you want to marry, they have a disease, like a not good disease. I used AIDS because it's kind of like the boogeyman of diseases. So let's just use AIDS. So it's like, all right, so you fall in love with this person and you're like, I'm saving myself. And then you're getting ready to get married and you got to do a blood test. And in the process of doing the test, you find out that your significant other has AIDS. Do you marry them anyways? Do you marry them anyways? Like, you love them, you want to be with them, but they have this thing that's going to be with them forever. And if you do marry them and then do have sexual intercourse, the likelihood is you are gonna get it as well. So then we go from 1 to 2 people. And then if you have kids, depending, but if you have kids, the likelihood is to go from 2 to 3 people. So then you'd be spreading this disease that is not good, is very nasty. And there's lots of modern medicine to deal with it, but like, do you want to be the person that's dealing with that? Do you want to spread that? I don't know. I heard today, and I didn't believe it. I still don't believe it. I think it's fascinating and weird, and I have mixed opinions about this concept of like going to get married. And then it's like, oh, well, then you do a blood test. And I'm like, and my lady was like, well, what? I don't have anything, so it doesn't even matter. And I'm like, I know, right? I'm not worried. I'm not worried about that. That wasn't a worry in my life. But on the same token, like, how effed would it be if you're going to get married and you find out, oh wow, this person has this or this or this, or like, oh, God forbid, you're like, oh my God, this person's like my second sister. What? Ah! I don't know. So I don't really have a solution. I think that generally speaking, there is a benefit in it. There is a benefit in culling out, deleting, erasing, or filtering through certain genetic things that we don't want, that are unequivocally not ideal. Like my hair. My hair is just not ideal. Like there's no doubt about it. It's just not an ideal thing. Okay? And I'm not even talking about the cosmetic stuff where guys everywhere are like, yeah, you know what? I want a big, it's like, that's not what I'm even talking about. I'm talking about like, I mean, because there are guys out there that they have this and they want this, and it's like I track with that. But what I'm talking about is like other things. I guess some are cosmetic and some are not, and there's a level of importance. Perhaps there is a value in culling that out, and I would argue that nature kind of does that in general. But it's fascinating to think that eugenics has such a nasty term because of what the Nazis did. And what they did wasn't eugenics. What they did was genocide. There's a difference, all right? Like if you have a culture or a race or a creed that you don't like and you erase them or attempt to erase them, that's genocide. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like, hey, there are genetic things that we don't like. Maybe we can kind of like as a group be like, okay, I'm glad you found someone you love, blah, 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 blah. Let's see if we can do that. But honestly, I don't think that's really workable. I think the best solution is kind of what CRISPR's doing with the technology in the sense, and it's not readily available yet, but the idea of like, you can mate with a person and do it the biological way, or you can go in the lab and be like, I like this or this or this. I don't like, sorry guys, it's a long day. I don't like this or this or this, and you can kind of like pick and choose the things that you like and then pass it on to your offspring. I think there's a lot of value to that because it maintains this concept of two individuals with their freedom and they find someone that they love and they have a relationship. And then also it allows for you to be like, hey, I don't want to pass on negative genes to my offspring. I don't. I think that's messed up. Like, I don't want my children to have thin hair like I do. I would like my children to be a little bit taller than me, but that's kind of silly, frankly. The hair thing is less silly. Like, frankly, I'm just like, no, I want my children to have, like, full-bodied hair and not have to worry about balding. That, as a dude, sucks. It sucks. And I wish I had, like, some sponsor where I'm like, Keeps or da-da-da, and, like, and they're going to pay me $15,000 because I talked about their product. I don't have that. But I can just say that, like, it's an interesting thing that I feel more of us should be looking into and talking about and thinking about in the what are the important things? What are the important things? And this is kind of a story time element, but when I was single, I ran into a lot of women that were just like, oh, well, I want a tall guy. And honestly, I scoffed at them a little bit because it was like, well, guys can't change their height. They're just born that way. Like, that's kind of a weird thing to choose because they can't change it. And I understand it. I do understand you want a guy that's taller than you, yada, yada, yada. And I think it's more important to find someone that you like, and I think you should focus on the things that make a person who they are, that they can change. So whether they're intelligent, how they talk, what they do, stuff like that, those are things that I think are better sources to judge by. And some of the better women that I've ever met, that's how they looked at guys. Like, you look at the guys they were with, and they were arguably slobs or heavier or whatever, but, like, you got that they loved that individual. Because, and that ultimately is what matters. It doesn't, like, the physical stuff matters kind of less. It takes a backseat to the things that make you like the person. And I think there's a lot of validity to that. And I wish that men and women would kind of focus more on, and also not on the immediate stuff, on the stuff that's long term. Like, you're gonna, hypothetically, if you get married, this is a person you're with forever. So just choosing them because they got like a nice rack or whatever, okay, but that is not gonna stay forever. So I'm gonna kind of leave you with this, which is, I don't think eugenics in humans is bad. I do think that culturally, how we have it set up, it doesn't really work. But I do think there is some validity to getting rid of some gene things that are not really pro-survival to the human race. I think that is super valuable, and I wish there was more science that was backing that up. So anyways, comment, like, share. I honestly want to know what you thought, because I rambled a lot, and this is a super long video again about this subject, but I just think, I think eugenics isn't inherently bad. When you get into genocide, that's horrible. But eugenics and genocide are not the same thing. They're totally different things. So it came up, I thought about it, I posted a video. It's on to you to comment, like, and you know what? If you have a separate thing that you want me to talk about, long-winded or otherwise, let me know, because I'll happily talk about it. I try to tackle these things and give my 2 or 20 or 150 cents on it. All right, peeps. Plaidman out.